Everybody doing? Drop us a little note in the comments. If you're having a good Tuesday, press the like button. If you're having a bad Tuesday, press the love button.
That's right. We'll make it better. It's going to get better.
We're here for you. Tuesday's tough. That's why I got to come join Scott and Nate on the internet.
Get your serve better. Because then you'll play tennis later, and then your serve's going to be booming, and you're going to feel much, much better about your day.
That's right. Before we get going here, it crossed my mind yesterday that a lot of people just see this all of a sudden, like they're just hanging out on Facebook and they get a notification that their two favorite bearded fellows are live.
In theory.
And they didn't sign up for this, and they're like, what are you even doing here live on my news feed? So what I want to do for you guys today is I want to drop a link here to make sure you sign up for this properly, because if you don't, you're not going to get all of the follow-up stuff, all of the great stuff that you get for free. There are recordings for sale. We'll talk about that several times throughout the challenge today. But if you have not signed up yet, go here. It is, in fact, free. And that link is right here. We are on Facebook and on YouTube, so you'll see Play Your Court commenting. I'll show it on the screen. This is kind of a long URL, so I recommend you scroll down into the comments section, look for that comment, copy the link. But if you've not actually signed up for this, go there, do that. Before we dive into the day 2 content, shall we do a quick recap of day 1 as people start to pour in here a bit?
You should definitely do the recap, because
if you do it, everybody will miss their weekend plans.
A little long-winded.
Right? A little long-winded. All right. So for those of you who weren't here yesterday, and remember, if you go sign up at this link for free, we actually give you recordings back to watch this on Facebook. I think we leave it up for like 24 hours, and then if you want access to this forever, which of course you do, and you want to print out this exact workbook, then definitely buy the recordings. But day 1, what we talked about to start was the continental grip, and how most of us have been taught that the continental grip is all about this index knuckle, and we've ignored the heel pad. So the big takeaway from the continental grip before you got bored was, hey, it's not just about the knuckle. Your heel pad needs to rest on that same bevel. Bevel 2, we showed you a drill, which is doing downs with the edge of your racket instead of with your strings. That's sort of the lie detector test as to whether or not you're doing it correctly or not. We then got into serve stance, which is really pretty simple, and there's not really a drill. You just need to understand this is what's going on. Your toe on your back foot and your heel should be even, and when you draw a line through your 2 toes, it should point to the outside net post. If you're lefty, you're just going to flip this, and if you're on the ad side, the instruction is the same. You would literally just pick Nate up, put him on the ad side. His stance would be exactly the same. So this is important because it's going to guarantee that our right hip and shoulder do actually get involved, and that we do get that rotation that we are looking for. Vanna?
I was waiting for it. I knew it was coming.
Thank you. Then we moved on to the penalty box drill, not to be confused with the toss location drill. The point of the penalty box drill is to get you in the rear pelvic tilt position. We discussed, I know, yesterday I had rocks in my mouth and I couldn't say that. Point of this drill is to get you into this position. You'll see Nate here creating lines. You don't need to pull the screen up, but you'll see lines, and we'll go through this again, that his knees, his hips, and his shoulders are all lined at an angle, creating a rear pelvic tilt, which is the second place we want to get power from. We can rotate this way. We can wind up and do a cartwheel for our second source of power. That's what this is all about. And then I believe lastly, right, was there only 4 exercises?
Yep, this is it.
Last, we talked about just where your toss needs to go and how to actually do it. We talked about no bend in the elbow, no bend in the wrist, holding the ball with your fingertips, not in the palm of your hand, releasing at eye level at 1 o'clock, and the drill to really think about where that ball should be going out into the court was placing a racket about 6 to 8 inches in front of you at 1 o'clock on the ground, and that being your target. So that was all the fun that we had yesterday. For those of you that weren't with us yesterday, the format of this is we are going to present on some stuff. We actually want you to ask questions while we're presenting on it, while they come to you. We don't want you to forget. And then when we stop at the end, we'll go through and we'll knock out as many questions as we can. We got to almost all of them yesterday. So don't be shy. I have noticed from previous challenges that as we get deeper into the challenge, the questions become more frequent. So if you've got questions, we are going to go in order. Make sure you put them on here as they come up. And without further ado,
day 2.
Let's get into day 2, shall we?
You said doo-doo.
You said doo-doo. All right, here we go.
That's right.
Let me get
We're
this
almost
off the
50.
screen. Somebody's got to be immature on the internet for you. Might as well be us.
Yeah, let's get it. All right. So day 2, we are talking about the right to left motion. And this is about the first move of the racket, when the racket really starts building up momentum. And this is what we're seeing on tour a whole lot more, is that, kind of back in the day when Scott and I learned, especially when I learned, because I'm quite a bit older than Scott.
Yes, you are.
There was a pendulum, and energy a lot of times would happen behind the server. Nowadays, what we see on tour is the momentum and energy occurring to the side. It's simplified. Again, we'll repeat this over and over again. The less moving parts, the less can go wrong. But it's about efficiency on the serve. So let's jump into what we're talking about here. And I'm going to show you this in steps with the right to left here. All right. So the very first thing that you want to do is just set up the racket from your ready position. You can see here, I'm in the ready position. The stance is where I want it to be. And from here, as the weight starts to shift to my back foot, I'm just getting a little bit of rhythm here. You can see that the racket moves out to the side of my body. And now this is really important when you start this. We want to have the racket tip pointed to the side fence. And super important is that we want to have a passive wrist. So the passive wrist should have the racket slightly below your hand. We don't want it to be even. We don't want it to be flush, because then we're just starting to serve with tension.
When he says passive wrists, just to clear up any confusion you might have, we're just talking about, like, this would be flexed, where see all of a sudden the racket comes up. See how when I just relax my wrist, the racket falls down? That's what we're talking about here.
Yep. You can think of Djokovic.
A lot of people be like, what do you mean passive wrist? That's all I mean.
Yeah. So, Djokovic improved his serve immensely. You'll notice when he starts, he keeps it very, very loose. Now, so the right to left, before you start connecting the other body parts, this is all you're going to focus on, is just simply saluting with the racket. So you'll see here and there, I'm like shaking the racket out, like illustrating, hey, got to keep it really, really loose. But from here, I'm simply saluting. That's it. We want to get in the habit of this move. All right. And the reason this is so important is that I'm willing to bet the large majority of people watching this, instead of the racket getting here, their palm flips open. So what we want is the palm to be here. And a lot of times as the racket is brought up, the palm does this, right? So instead of the palm facing inward, like you can see on the video, the palm does this to where it's open. And you've immediately entered waiter tray, and you've locked out the joint position that's going to allow you to get into efficient racket drop. So this is step 1 of the right to left. Now, step 2 is, let me see here. This guy is putting it kind of all together, because remember, yesterday what we talked about was how the hips and the shoulders have to operate as a unit. So the goal here is to really get the racket on the non-dominant side of my body. So as a rafter, I like Patrick Rafter, but I don't know where that came from. As a righty,
as a rafter,
as a raptor. Hey. So as a righty, I want the racket on the left side of my body. All right. So lefty, you're just going to reverse that. It's gonna go the other way. But
are we allowed to just be like, hey, if you're left-handed, just reverse that?
Yeah, yeah.
For the whole challenge.
Yeah, and
we say it once right now and then just be done.
Yeah, we
love you. It's
we're
just like,
so bad about neglecting lefties, but it really is. You're just flipping it, right?
Everything we talk about.
So here the emphasis is, you can see I'm just starting with the racket moving right to left. But then what you're going to notice is that as my tossing arm goes up, you're going to see the hips and shoulders rotate. We're coiling. This is exactly what we talked about yesterday, operating as a unit. So again, the arm goes up, the racket moves right to left as the body opens. It all happens together. Now the tossing arm should lead. So what you'll notice here is that the tossing arm starts to go up, the racket plays catch up, and then from there, the shoulders and hips get into this power position. So just to reiterate what Scott was talking about before, this is the shoulder and hip rear pelvic tilt, right? This is where we want to see these lines. But this is in conjunction with opening, but the racket has to move in this right to left motion.
One of the things that we'll talk about, so I mean, how many of you guys have heard of the dreaded waiter's tray, right? It's called waiter's tray because you look like a waiter holding drinks on a tray. And if you get into this position, it's really going to be hard to serve 100 miles an hour. Darn near impossible.
I haven't.
There's one dude maybe ever.
Yeah. And so,
but
here's the thing. So waiter's tray, if the racket is simply open here on the back, but the rest of it goes right, it can be done. You know, David Ferrer had a waiter's tray.
I mean, you can run a marathon without shoes on, but doesn't mean it's a good idea, right?
The problem is most people, and when I say most people, like 99% of people, when their racket ends up in this position, what ends up happening is that the elbow doesn't operate on the other side of their body. When the wrist falls over, the elbow internally rotates, and now that racket drop that Scott's talking about is nearly impossible. And that synergy between the two happens 99% of the time. You get the rare exception of like a David Ferrer who lays his wrist back, but he does an amazing job as a professional athlete to getting the coil. That's just not going to happen in real life.
So where we're headed with this, if you're right to left, like if you're, do you mind just sort of dragging the video showing the salute motion? If you're making this motion with your racket, it's going to be really bizarre for you to go from here to here and then suddenly be like, whoops, waiter's tray, right? So if you suffer from waiter's tray, my guess is this is going to be the fix that actually finally gets you into that racket drop. And we'll talk more about this throughout the challenge. But the racket drop is where all the power on the serve comes from. So if you don't have this right to left motion, or if you end up in waiter's tray and that racket doesn't ever track down your back, you are not going to serve over 100 miles an hour, and you are not going to add the 15 miles per hour that we're promising you in this challenge. So if you learn one thing, this might be it. I mean, shy of like if you're not turning your hips and shoulders because your stance is wrong, like that's going to be a really quick fix. But this is going to be the one, like the big unlock where like I've struggled with waiter's tray for 20 years. And when I start abbreviating, I just go like this, all of a sudden waiter's tray is gone. Yeah. And all of a sudden I've got that bullwhip effect that I've always wanted. And now, wow, Scott, Nate, you guys are geniuses. That serve over 100 miles an hour. So
genius.
Take this the most serious of anything we've said so far.
This combined with the next exercise is, I mean, day 2 is the big one. That doesn't mean we don't want you to attend the rest of them, but these 2 days are important.
You should honestly, if you have waiter's tray and your stance was wrong and you fix those 2 things with the right to left and a correct stance, you should be serving like 40 miles per hour faster, legitimately.
Concur. So when you're practicing, this is what I want you to do. Just start with the right to left. Right, don't worry about what your body's doing.
You want to zoom in just a skosh?
Yeah.
You get space too?
Yeah, I'll go back just a little bit. So just do this. Focus on the palm stain towards what would be the back of your head. Then combine the tossing arm, but don't actually toss the ball yet. Right? Just combine how that feels and work on holding it. Get this muscle memory so you really practice it. And when you feel comfortable, fumble the ball like me and then have to start over. See, we're being legit here, man. We didn't cut this out. We all make mistakes. It's cool. And now from here, I'll zoom out just a little bit so you can see. Then work on tossing and making this move all come together. And then you can practice the penalty box drill that we did on day 1, where you're establishing the rear pelvic tilt. Dang it.
Man, that's going to be tough to say for 5 whole days. One of us is going to get it wrong every day.
Yeah, I butchered it. That's fair. All right, so let's talk about how the racket drop actually occurs, right? Going into day 2, exercise 2.
Oh, Vanna. Right. Vanna.
I figured it was your turn. You want to intro this?
Bam. I'd love to. So the way your racket and arm approach the ball, as you may have guessed, play a pretty big role in how things go here. And understanding how weight in sort of the kinetic chain is activated is what this drill is all about. You want me to keep going, or you want to take it from me?
I can hop in. Okay. You know I like to talk, but if you'd like to keep going, you can, sweetheart.
No, that's cool. Everybody, I'll speak with you in about 20 minutes. Enjoy this. It's going to be good.
All right. So what we're talking about is truly how the kinetic chain starts. We're talking about the lower body and its involvement. And a lot of times what Scott and I run into, I would say, what do you think? Like pretty much every client we've ever worked with, they feel like they need to put their racket down their back.
Yep.
right? And it's like there's some antiquated instruction. What have you heard? Like the brush the hair,
touch your ponytail, scratch your back. Don't do those things.
Yeah, don't scratch your back because there's a lot more space between the racket and your back. But what you should be focusing on instead is what is your elbow doing? If you get the elbow in the correct position, the racket drop is just the byproduct of using your legs correctly.
Say that again.
Okay. So
if you get your
I don't know
elbow
if I can say it so eloquently
in the correct position, the racket drop is just a byproduct
of using your legs correctly.
Using your legs correctly.
That's good. You're listening. Thanks. I was a little scared to.
It's important. I mean, that is important because it's like everybody's trying to figure out what to do with this racket arm, and it's like, yeah, it actually comes back to your feet if you're doing this right.
That's right. So in this particular exercise, I know it's going to seem goofy, but I promise what you need to do is give yourself a target. Give your elbow a destination, if you will, like drop a pin, right? So when you do this, don't toss particularly high. You can see that I'm just releasing relatively low. And then all I'm thinking about is how do I get my elbow to the ball? That's all I want here is I want my elbow to come around and make contact with the ball. All right. And what you'll see is that when my elbow is in this position, voila. Everybody see that? I'm in a racket drop and I didn't have to think about like, how did my racket get there? I simply am using the positions that we've worked on the correct stance. And then I'm working on the right to left and allowing this to happen naturally. So let me zoom back out and we'll just watch this again. And you will notice, I'm going to talk about this more in just a moment. If I can zoom out, good grief.
Remember my first time using an iPad?
Technology's tough, man. Now, what I do want you to notice here is my feet. Like there is, and I'm going to talk about this a whole lot more in the next exercise, but notice how the weight comes up on especially my back foot here. I'm using my back foot to push energy down, which then drives my hip and then drives the elbow. Okay, that is the kinetic chain. So I'm pushing down, foot comes up to the toes, and the elbow makes contact with the ball. And that is how we get an organic racket drop. It's just the byproduct of using the legs correctly, right?
Yep. If you'll go back to when your racket drop is down your back, because we had this discovery at our last workshop. If you struggle with understanding kind of where your racket drop should be and what it feels like after this, I just want to kind of tease this. Can I draw on here? Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about how imagine your racket weighed a whole bunch. Like imagine your racket weighed 30 pounds. And the only way to get that thing moving up against this arrow would be to kind of activate your legs to get it firing. So like imagine you're Nate right now and I'm holding on to the bottom of your racket, pulling down in the direction this arrow is going. And I'm telling you, got to swing it. You couldn't just do it with a tricep pull. You'd have to push your feet into the ground and use your body weight to kind of get that racket moving. That's sort of a synonym to this same drill. If you're going out there and you're doing the elbow to the ball drill and you're like, I don't get it, go out there and imagine that your tennis racket weighs 90 pounds and then figure out how you would pull it up.
And that's the Scott Baxter original. I was that's
pretty
really
rare.
Good.
Very rare.
Because at the end of the day, serving is a pushing and a pulling exercise. So where does the pushing occur? Right? The pushing occurs with the feet. Right? I'm pushing through the ground, and then the pulling is exactly what Scott's talking about. You're pulling the racket up and out. It's why you hear a lot of coaches talk about like drawing the sword, which is still good. But I think when you really think about
the sword weighs 90 pounds, so that you
draw
it with your feet, not just with your tricep.
Yeah, I think like what you told a student here in Virginia Beach when we were training is like, if you had a heavy sack, right, like
Santa Claus,
and you had to like pull it over, right, that's going to be a lot like what the serve feels.
Yep.
That's going to be a lot like how the serve feels.
Easy for you to say.
English is tough.
I've had 3 people ask about these workshops in here, so I'm just going to post that link and then we'll carry on.
Y'all knew it was coming?
I'm not even, they're asking. I don't even know. Our next one is, I wasn't prepared to pitch this.
The workshop.
Our next one is in August, the City Open. I think it's August 3rd. If that's wrong, I'm sorry. But go here. if you want to come train this stuff with us live. Also, if you don't want to remember this link, again, it's in the comments section down below, or you can just go to PlayYourCourt.com and it's in one of the nav items up top. You can tell I was ready to pitch this.
I'm not the big sales guy, but I will say this is in conjunction with the City Open, which is just one of our favorite tournaments. If you've never been, it's super cool. Like you can basically just bump into like
Nate
the
was ready to
Alphas.
pitch this. Look at this.
Yeah, well, you know.
It's on the Saturday of that tournament. So if you're in DC for the City Open and you want to play this game in real life with me and Nate, that's where you go to do it. Sorry, just answering Aaron's question there. Okay.
There we go. All right, shall we? The last exercise of the day.
Oh. Pulse-up drill. We kind of just teased
this is
what we're talking about.
This is really in conjunction with what we just did, but now you're doing it with the racket.
Yep.
All right, so this one, we're going to be brief on this. We're going to leave a lot of time for questions here because this is really piggybacking on what we just talked about. And we did this intentionally. I mean, we designed this course half a decade ago. In day 2, these are the 2 core principles of the serve. They're the most important. So we didn't want to convolute it with a whole bunch of other instruction. We're like, we're just going to talk about these 2 things. So what you're doing now is putting the emphasis on your feet. And the way that you can think about this, we always tell people, for you P90X fans, if you do a tricep extension, right, it's a very static movement. You're simply taking the weight and you're just exercising the tricep. But in P90X, they like to call it throw the bomb. And this is where you got your back foot involved. And this goes right on what Scott was talking about, how much, pulling something heavy up over your back. But here, I'm using my back leg to really drive this weight. And that was the intention of this exercise for P90X. 3-2.
5-0.
Yeah, that was 3-2. 5-0. So here, I'm using the legs to drive the serve. And what I like to do here is you can see my hand, I'm pointing up in the direction I want the racket to go. That also means that my eyes and head are up in the direction that I want to go. You're Superman. Like Superman never looked down and took off to fly, right? Like his head was up. He knew he had to look to see where he's going, I guess. All right, but from here, you're pushing through the ground and then you're allowing it to flip. And we want you to hold contact. We want you to hold extension so that the arm gets completely straight. And when this is done correctly, what you'll see is that there's a line that'll go from your hitting arm to your shoulders. Now, I'm not in a perfect, it's not perfect here because I'm not using a full service motion, but you get the general idea of what you're aiming towards. Now, what I want to show you is what we refer to as the power loop. I think a lot of people kind of get it convoluted. It's like, well, how is the racket moving? It seems so complicated. And really what the racket's doing is it goes right to left. And then from here, as it drops, it then flips up to contact. All right, so it goes right to left. It loops. Man, I almost nailed that. That was almost perfect. That was pretty good. I was a little scared to do that, I'll be honest. But I want you all to see this. This is really important.
Scary.
Right to left, shoulders and hips open. The racket moves right. Sorry, the racket is moved right to left. And now this is the part that is so key that I want you to see. When my energy goes up, so watch, as my legs straighten out, the racket drops. This is the cartwheel effect. This is where you get an organic racket drop, and this is where you elbow the ball right here. All right, so I'll just show you one more thing, and then I'll stop yapping. All right, so this is what I want you to see. How do we know energy is loaded down to the ground? Well, my knees are bent, right? My heel is up. Doesn't have to be this super dynamic, you don't have to jump like LeBron James. You just have to load energy down. Now, as my energy goes up, the racket's going to go down. Watch my legs. Straighten out, energy goes up, and the racket drops and then flips out to contact. And that is the pulse-up drill. Anything you like that?
Again, if it feels funky, I think it's just reiterating the idea that your racket weighs a lot.
Yeah.
Because I think every time we've done this live with folks, They're like, I don't get it. I'm like, well, what if I put a sledgehammer in your hands as your racket? Could you swing it without using your legs? And they're like, no. And I'm like, all right, well, then just pretend like your racket weighs 25 pounds.
Yeah.
I think that's where you'll feel why you do this, or at least you'll feel what correct is.
Yeah. And I think when you get out here, and I hope you do, we really hope we set this up where it's like a challenge because we wanted to give you exercises that you could get out and do.
Yeah, the goal would be that you're going and doing these every day. I know we all have real lives. I never let my work get in the way of my tennis, but hey.
Yeah. Clearly.
The goal here would be we're giving you a couple things per day, most, if not all of which really you could do in your house if you have high ceilings or outside in your yard, or, go practice this stuff each day. We're only 2 days in. You could very much do the recap of day 1 and day 2 and go practice all these things today before we see you tomorrow on day 3.
And we don't want you hitting a ball yet, right?
Yep.
I mean, if you try to make this and put it into your serve immediately, you're going to lose sight of like what the joint position are and like how the body's performing the exercise because you're going to be focused on hitting the ball, and then you're just going to run back into old muscle memory.
I'll give you this shtick too. A lot of folks are like, why does your freaking 5-day internet challenge add 15 miles per hour to my serve when my coaches can't? And don't forget, we're the biggest tennis lesson provider in the world. So I'm not ripping on tennis coaches here. But the reality is, even if you took a 1-hour lesson with us, if at the end, if we just said, all right, well, for the last 10 minutes, we're going to work on your serve. I mean, we're taking 5 days right now and giving you 15 specific drills to work on really 5 different pieces of the serve. So the reason this works is because you don't have a ball in your hand yet. And we're teaching you step-by-step and progressions and regressions to come back to. So buy into this and don't blame your local coach. Like if your local coach isn't running you through this, like how could he possibly in 15 minutes of the end of a lesson, right? Like all
But to Scott's point,
all they really have time to do is just help you kind of memorize something you don't understand.
Their backs are against the wall. Like it's kind of up to you. Like go to your coach and be like, I just want to work on my serve today. But I mean, I took lessons. Like I know it was like, hey, I got an hour for 45 minutes. I want to hit balls. I want to get my exercise. I want to feel good.
You want to make it feel good as the coach. You don't want to you don't want to
get some serves for 10 minutes and then we'll pick up balls and we're done.
Right. So point being, the reason this is going to work for you if you actually follow the instructions.
A camera, it's disgusted with us. It just wants to.
Every time I talk, the camera's like, nope.
Don't do it.
So where we're headed with this is with this workbook and with these specific exercises, if you go practice this stuff and learn it step by step versus just memorize something you don't understand, you'll know what your coach knows. You'll know underneath the hood how it's built. You'll be able to fix things when they don't go right. Like after yesterday, you should know exactly why your toss is going where it's going, right? So some serious camera issues. We're just going to work off my camera laptop for Q&A, Nate.
There we go.
I don't know what's going on with our camera here.
Beautiful.
But let's stay here for Q&A. We've got a lot of questions here. So what I'm going to do first, one of the questions I get every single time we do this is how do I get the workbook? So the first thing we're going to do here is throw on where you can go buy the recordings in the workbook. And then Nate, why don't I do a recap of day 2 quickly while that's up on the screen so these guys can go here and grab the workbook in the recordings if they would like to. So
want to show them the demo?
Yeah, let's do a quick day 2 recap. We started with right to left. Let me just see if I can make our camera work one more time, guys. I am so sorry. Of course, when we test this thing, it works perfectly all morning long. We get live, it falls apart. If it falls off again, we'll just use my laptop camera, but this is what live looks like. So day 2 recap, we talked about right to left, starting with this passive wrist to ensure you're getting this salute motion and how important.
Laptop camera. We got it. We can
Back
focus.
to the laptop camera.
We got it. You guys can see
This
this.
is brutal. All right. Right to left, we're talking about how important this is to avoid the waiter's tray, right? If you're doing this correctly, there's really no way to come from this salute motion to this waiter's tray that we're so worried about, right? So that's the big piece of the first exercise here on day 2. The second piece, we talked about the elbow, the ball drill, and this is really to just get you to understand by putting my camera is just freaking out. So you can see here in the camera, let me see if I can get out of the way and zoom in just a little bit. You think about putting your elbow up towards the ball and the racket coming down your back. That's going to be a better thought than thinking about scratching your ponytail or placing your racket down your back. We want the racket to go down your back as a result of your elbow firing up, right? So if I'm holding a racket here and my elbow fires up, you see my racket naturally goes down my back. I'm not thinking about putting my racket down my back. It's just happening because my elbow is firing correctly, as you can see here in the video. And the last part, we talked about imagining that your racket is just really, 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 really heavy, right? So if your racket was really, really, really heavy and it was stuck down your back and you had to pull it up, you would have to sort of bend your knees and get your feet involved to get that racket floating up in the air. And so we talk about the pulse-up drill. That's what this is all about. When we're swinging with our elbow and activating our feet, you'll see that pulse-up drill come into effect here. So that is what we've got. I am going to try this camera one more time, and I'm going to take the suggestion.
You're a glutton for punishment, man.
You know, this is not going to work, but I just feel like it'd be a better experience.
Because we want to answer the questions. We know you have them.
We can answer the questions.
You can be patient with us.
It would just
we'll get
be
you questions.
Cool if we could do it on the camera right there. All right, we're going to try this. I just shut down a bunch of stuff that was running in the background on my computer, so fingers crossed. But guys, I'm sorry. I've been in business for 15 years, and this is the least fun I've had on
been defeated by a little teeny tiny camera.
All right. Well, we're going to stay here on this camera and answer some questions. So sincere apologies. Let's get down to business. So there are a ton of questions here. I am going to try and go through as many of them as I can, starting from the very beginning. And this is a quick one, so I'm just going to plow through this fast. How many miles per hour does the serve stance add? If you're doing it wrong, it can be a lot. It's the difference between rotating your shoulders and not. So I'm going to say a lot, depending on how
it's not a single. It's not like the single component of the stance, but it's like
it certainly matters.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to get everything else that you need if the stance isn't correct. So I would say that it's the starting phase that is extremely important. It's a fundamental. All fundamentals are necessary.
For sure, for sure. Let's see here. How can we measure our serve speed? Swing Vision's probably what I'd recommend. We don't have a partnership with them or anything, but there's just not honestly a lot of good solutions. That's probably the best one. It's an app.
Yeah, I mean,
how much it is.
You can order the fairly affordable radar guns. I mean, none of them are truly all that accurate. Swing Vision is pretty accurate. I think that's what we would typically use, you know, and it's on your phone, so it's super easy, super accessible.
And their technology is pretty good too.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot cheaper than trying to buy like an actual radar gun when you're trying to get the serve.
For sure. So that's what we'd recommend there. Raj asks, is this elbow to the ball motion also relevant to the kick serve?
100%. Yeah, it's relevant to it's relevant to all of them, right? I mean, like the difference in the kick serve is that you would make contact back here, right? Like your elbow, instead of getting the elbow forward, you would actually try to focus on getting contact a little bit back behind you, because the difference between the kick serve and the flat serve is really just where you're making contact. The kick serve is going to operate more parallel to the baseline, and then a flat serve is going to break the plane of the baseline. You want contact out in front.
Indeed, indeed. Do I try this camera again? No, I appreciate the comments and you guys sticking with us. If you didn't think this was live, how about now?
Yeah.
Just stay here.
Yeah, how many times are you gonna let that thing
it just doesn't
disappoint
make sense.
you? You know?
It's not working. All
it's
right.
like dating a girl and she's broken up with you 18 times. You're like, I think I'm gonna give it one more.
I don't know. She's my soulmate, Nate. Again, VP with the Korean food call. I don't understand it, but I think it's funny, so I'm going to show it.
Shabu shabu. Let's
Cheers,
go.
gents. All right, here we go. In the first drill, you were showing the racket salute, the right to left motion. When you toss the ball, in reality, when you toss, isn't the racket head still pointing down?
The first drill, you were showing the racket salute when you toss the ball. In reality, when you toss, isn't the head still pointing down? Yeah. Yeah, we covered that though, right? Like, isn't that what?
Yeah, that was the
pull that up real
instruction.
quick.
So, yeah, like as the racket, and now that we're using my laptop camera, this is actually easier to see. When I salute here, the tip is still pointing down, right? You can see this is the head guard of the racket. And if I'm in that archer's pose, this is the tip of the racket still pointing down towards the ground. I guess maybe you could argue, depending on how you're thinking about it, that it's pointing up towards the sky. Let me get that off the screen so we can see.
Yeah. So here, right to left.
Hard on that laptop so they can see us.
So right to left is initiated. Strings are slightly down, but not all the way down. And there's plenty of pros that are keeping, if my hand's the racket, instead of keeping the racket here, they'll keep it here. That's fine. But it's personal preference. We want you to try to keep the hand in a little bit though, because our guess is the majority of the viewers are having issues with the wrists going the other way and getting into waiter's trap. I think that answers that question.
Yeah, for sure. This is a good one from Stacy. When serving, are you looking at the ball or the racket where the ball hits? There's a lot of questions here, so answer that one first. Where are you looking as you make contact with the ball? I mean, at the ball, right? Like, I'm keeping my eye on the ball the entire time through contact, and then I'm, my gaze will naturally come down to following where my serve went to.
Yeah, I mean, we're big fans of getting your eyes up to where you would like the ball to go, and then never changing that. I'll show you something real quick that I think is really good.
Let me move this
and I happen to have it
so they can see
right here. And let's be clear, you can't see contact. Like when your racket is moving forward to the ball, you can't see it, but what you can do is keep your head still in order to try to allow the contact to be as clean as it can be. What I wanted to show you is what's happening with Kyrgios, right? So
eyes way up.
Yeah, I mean, before the racket's even moving, the eyes are up. And then if I let this play through, watch his head here. Everything operates around his head that barely moves, right? Like the head hasn't moved at all. It's just his body operating, and nothing changes until he's on the forward swing. I advise that. I think Scott and I both are like, the earlier you can get your eyes up, the better.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as you say all the time when we're working on this live, you don't need to look down at your hands to know that you're going to toss the ball up, right? Like, it's a foregone conclusion. So this is probably why Kyrgios starts looking up. This is a multiple part question. So as far as aiming your serve is as simple as the direction in which the racket face points, right? So I'm going to approach the ball in almost like a tomahawk motion, which we're going to talk about tomorrow. At contact, wherever your strings point is where the ball is going to go. So this is really easy to see. If I point my strings this way, ball's going this way. As it turns, wherever I'm pointing is where the ball is going to go, right? So at contact, depending on how much you open or close your wrist, that's going to determine your aim. You have anything you want to add there? It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, just where you strike the ball, right? The racket, as the racket approaches the ball, it's where you're going to hit it. If you imagine a clock on the ball, right? But I'm going to face it towards me. If I'm hitting out towards 5 o'clock, a lot of players are saying to cut off the ear, but 5 o'clock is surely where you're kind of aiming. That's going to give me slice. I'm going to hit more out wide or, potentially a flat. If I'm hitting a kick, I'm going to be more under the ball, right? I'm going to be aiming under here, and I'm going to get it more on the chin. And if I'm hitting flat, I'm aiming for the nose of the ball. So I can show you here. That's where I'd be aiming for a flat serve.
Indeed, indeed. Hinton says, I thought it was my laptop acting up. Nope, it's our stupid camera. We're really sorry.
Good thing we're not a technology company.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be embarrassing. This is a great question. So how important is flexibility in shoulder health in serving fast, and what stretches or exercises do you recommend? So important. That said, I mean, I have a torn rotator cuff in my right shoulder, and if you PT it correctly, you can still serve big. But yeah, in an ideal world, yeah, you're healthy and your maximum flexibility. But that's not to say you can't serve over 100 without it.
Yeah, flexibility is important. Quick muscle twitch. Some of us are born with it more so than others, but it's something that you can develop. A lot of time, this is determined by how much you were playing throwing sports as a kid, and when it comes to the serve. But yeah, to Scott's point, you can definitely improve your flexibility.
A lot of the stuff that I do for PT now that allows me to play, technically injured, is what I would recommend they do for injury prevention also, because all it is strengthening. I'm not a doctor. Let me say that first of all. This is not medical advice. But
you play one on TV.
But I play one on TV, and we are on TV right now. So the band work, all the stuff that you would be recommended if you had a rotator cuff tear, like the resistance bands. We talk about. Let me move the comment here so you can see. We talk about like getting the elbow straight and pulling away from the wall, and then the other exercise, if the band was this way, pulling the other direction. We talk about strengthening here by pulling a band up. So just creating some really lightweight tension to strengthen the small muscles all around the shoulder joint is definitely what I would recommend.
I would YouTube it. I think that's going to be easier. There's a lot of.
He was like, Scott's an idiot.
No, I think that's good. It's going to be really hard to like demonstrate it in this environment. But there's if you
shoulder strengthening exercises or PT. Probably the first couple YouTube videos are going to be
good. You can see it.
I can't help it. I got to try this camera one more time. Spoiler alert, it's going to break, but we're going to do it anyway. Because it'll work right now. And then look how beautiful everything is. It's like you didn't know our lighting setup was a problem. Everything's just great. And then before you know it, it breaks.
No, we're good.
We're good for the moment. There's no chance this works, but I couldn't help it. All right. Jeff has some nice things to say. Guys, these classes are awesome.
Hey, thanks, man.
Thank you, Jeff. You're awesome. Our technology today has not been as awesome. You focused on the take back with getting the tip of the racket pointed out to the side. Could you focus on the take back again from starting position to just before? Do you mind doing that?
Yeah, so I think what he's asking is how do you bring the ball and racket together, right? So this is the crux of it. This is what everybody wants to do. And when they do, they get back to their old muscle memory. Because when the ball becomes connected with the racket, it becomes a down together, up together. And you just end up back in the same groove. So for now, if you trust us and you say for tomorrow, we're going to get into how to bring the ball and racket together, but I'd advise that you don't, because I talked about this before. If the groove is here and you're trying to just operate a little bit different than the groove, you're going to just be in the same groove again. We want it here. We want it to be so far away from each other they can never intersect. And that's keeping the ball and racket away from each other. I'd start like this for now, and then you can start working on bringing the ball and racket together. I kind of want to tell him how, but then I'd just be spoiling tomorrow.
Yeah, you're spoiling tomorrow's instruction. Don't go.
So stay tuned, Jeff.
That's right. I lost my place here. Does the course on sale include all the videos and tips to watch freely? Yes, and now it's going to include a new version of day 2 that you and I are going to go film with a camera that works. So yeah, the recordings again are here. If you need them, I'll leave that up. This was dumb. I know that URL is not super convenient, but again, you don't have to like remember this off the screen. If you want to get the recordings that we're talking about right now, as well as a new and improved version of the recordings that we're going to film over again because these are terrible, and the workbook that we've been following along with, you can print out, put in your bag. This is the place to do it. You don't have to look right here to do it. Just look down if you're on Facebook or on YouTube. It'll be in the comments section. Let's move on here to Gary or Jerry.
Sure.
Jerry, my dominant right shoulder.
An A, man. Jerry.
I can't tell.
Jerry.
Okay. My dominant right shoulder has moderate rotator cuff tears. Mine too. Trying to modify my 3-5-ish serve without further injury, but I want to add more power. Any experience with this situation? Yeah, an absolute ton. I mean, most rec players that we teach in their 40s, look, as you get older, your body doesn't work as well as it did when you're 18. So we often experience rec level players with shoulder problems. The exact curriculum we're going through right now is really simultaneously designed for injury prevention, right? Like if your toss, for example, is too far behind your head and you're making contact like that, that's going to cause injury problems. If you're arming the ball really hard because you don't understand the racket drop and you're trying to generate power from the wrong places, that can cause pain, and create tennis elbow. So getting technique right, believe it or not, is actually the key to being able to serve correctly with most injuries. Now, if you're fresh off a serious rotator cuff tear and the doctor says don't, listen to the doctor, not to Uncle Scott. But
PT it up.
But yeah,
I will say, just from our experience, because we both had shoulder injuries, when I first came back, I took a long time off, 3 months, and really rehabbed the arm. But when I came back, I was trying not to like swing too hard, and I was like accidentally arming the ball. Like, do it loose. Like, focus on using your legs and not. I think when we're scared, we try to slow it down, and that's the worst thing. All of a sudden, your arm is just going to be just stuck in these like breaks that are just, the tension is going to be the issue.
For sure.
Swing free.
Let's see here. Casey. Oh, very nice words, my friend. So Scott, Nate, I teach for you in San Francisco area, and students love your videos. Glad you broke the serve elements down before hitting a serve, and students need to practice this between lessons. Thanks for all you guys do for the home gamers. Hey, you are most welcome, Casey. Thanks for teaching for us and all you do with our local students.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you.
Let's see here. How long from practice right to left and make it work with a real ball at just this stage? I mean, it's tough to say, right? I mean, there's people who are athletic enough where they'll get it first try. And there's people that are going to need a lot more reps. So it's tough to kind of know the answer to that. But I do think you should be able to go out there and in an hour understand what correct feels like.
Yeah.
And we're building on stages here, right? So this is day 2. We were not giving you hundreds of things to think about. Really, today was just right to left and understanding how I want that elbow to create the racket drop in the pulse up with the feet, right? So we're trying to give you sort of small nuggets so that you can go digest this and practice just this one thing. I mean, go out there for 30 minutes, and I would be surprised if after about 30 minutes you didn't at least feel what we're talking about.
Yeah, we've had some people had immediate success where the right to left solves a lot of issues, and we've had other people that really have to connect what's happening with the racket drop by using the legs correctly. So, but that's why there's a day 3, 4, and 5. There's other components to success.
For sure. We have time for maybe, let's do 3 or 4 more here. How much does the choice of racket and string tension affect serve speed? Considerably. I'll give you a 1-minute lesson here. If you've ever walked out to your local courts and seen like a really small old man, like let's call him a 95-year-old, very feeble, not muscular old guy. You see him toss the ball up and he hits the serve and he's got some like huge snowshoe looking racket and the ball just goes, 80 miles an hour. And you're like, how did that old man hit 80 miles an hour? The answer is he's got a very head-heavy racket. So all of the weight in his racket would be in the head. And so all he has to do is get that racket kind of over the hill, and then this heavy head generates all the power. Now, if you look at me, I'm a big boy. I'm a 215-pound, 6'4" gentleman.
Love some cookies.
So I'm using a 12-ounce racket where all the weight for me is going to be prominently in the handle because I don't want any extra juice from the racket or I'm going to hit the ball over the back fence. So finding that correct balance is extremely important. And I don't want to dive too much into like equipment and how to search for it, but you want to just give them like a general guideline. I mean,
yeah, I mean, we can look at the tour, right? Like there's some players that prefer a lighter frame because it moves quicker, it creates racket head speed. At the end of the day, what we're talking about is racket head speed. But then to Scott's point, like if you can get a 12, 14 ounce racket moving, then you just have a heavier, frame mass. What is the equation here? But like the mass working up with that speed is obviously going to be greater than a lighter mass moving at about the same speed. But for most players at the recreational level, I think they're going to find that something in between like a 10-8, 10-6, 10-8 is where they're really going to get the racket moving. I'll just touch with the strings. I mean, the lower tension, the more power you have. The tighter the tension, the more
that's
control
straight
you're
up.
typically
There's
going to
no,
have.
yeah. I mean, think trampoline effect.
Yep.
All right. Does the height of the player affect where the ball should be tossed and or hit when serving What's the height where you can begin to hit down on it? 6'11"?
Uh,
6'9"?
yeah, I think
The answer is
blanking
no,
here.
unless you're
I think it's
abnormally tall, right?
Yeah, I think at 6'7", you can start getting to the point that you can hit slightly down on the ball.
So yeah, Adolfo, if you're 6'7" or taller, then yes, you can. And it's even then, it's a small adjustment in the path of your racket towards the ball.
Adolfo, for a lot of players, when they're shorter, it's either about getting off the ground and improving trajectory, because that's really what jumping does, is that you're improving where you're contacting the ball, so it's easier to hit spots in the court, or they're using more spin, right? I mean, Diego Schwartzman is a great example. It's like, guys, one of the smallest guys on tour, but still hits a really effective serve, but he's putting a lot more spin on his serve than, say, an Isner. He's having to get slice or top spin on the serve to improve the margins.
Yep. I don't want to jinx it, but this camera's been working for the last 10 minutes for seemingly no reason. I didn't do anything differently.
Yeah, well.
It's great. Gotta love tech. Let's see here. Another super job, guys. Gary, thank you very much. We appreciate you.
Let's see. B-Man said, "What's up?"
Yep. B-Man, what's up to you, my friend?
Could throw back to a great commercial.
Oh,
there's B-Man too. There you
go. You guys recommend a low elbow in the trophy position or higher under the shoulder? A pro teaching me the low elbow. The pro is teaching me the low elbow for some reason.
So
be careful.
Yeah, well, we're working with a student right now that has a really low elbow, and it's like what we refer to as catastrophic failure. Like, there's no way the serve can operate. Here's
no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, here's the thing. I'll just pull up Curious again.
I'm gonna hide your.
If the elbow if you're talking about the elbow in this position, I think that's a really difficult place to kind of work from. What we really want is the ability to work and keep the elbow up, and then I'll turn sideways. So my elbow is up. I mean, I wanted at least 90 in this position, in the true power position. Now, if the elbow dips in the rear lateral tilt because of the toss, that's all that's happening here. I know you can't see my other arm, but as I toss, then it's going to dip. That position of the elbow getting low is fantastic.
Because your elbow's not lowering, your hips are bending.
I think what ends up happening is people kind of see the Andy Roddick's, who had a very classic low elbow through here. And Carlos Alcaraz does to some degree. He keeps his elbow pretty tight to his body and low. I just think that lends itself to other things breaking down more frequently. I think it's a much easier place to be elbow up and then use the rear lateral tilt to get the elbow down. It serves kind of the same purpose.
Yep. Agree completely.
He said, should I run away from him? No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. He may ask him. I think it's fair, and I think you guys should all do this with your coaches. Ask him why he prefers the low elbow,
and then run away from him. I'm totally kidding. Totally kidding. My guess is there's something lost in communication there. There's very few coaches that would tell you to clamp your elbow in against your body. That can really lead to some serious shoulder damage. So
yeah, I'm thinking there's something lost in context.
I would agree.
I'm assuming coach knows what's up.
I would agree. What causes the racket twisting at impact? Playing with 112 frame, stiff, loss of power. I don't know that I follow the question. Do you understand what we're trying to solve here?
Playing with the 112 frame, stiff. So he's saying the stiffness rating is 112, I'm assuming, not a 112 head size. If it's a 112 head size, racket's probably going to be too light. Even if it's stiffness, the lighter the racket, the more it's going to lose its stability. That's why a lot of players that are advanced prefer.
They're talking about. Maybe it is a huge racket head.
Yeah. So like Scott was playing with a 12-inch racket, that racket's going to have plow. So when it meets the ball, it's going to plow through. Where it's like, I like racket speed, so I prefer to play with a lighter racket, but I have to be careful at contact because it will get a little bit more wobbly, especially if the stroke gets too big.
Right. I'm going to defer to you here because you got some wrist action stuff. Some botched wrist surgery. I can't bend the wrist much at all or rotate it too much. Any workarounds? There's really not.
We tell people all the time where everyone argues, what is the biggest contributing factor to power? Is it the legs? Is it, whatever it might be? It's your anatomy of the wrist. The wrist is where we're gifted to have that snap. David, I feel for you, man. I've got an ECU tear. I've got a TFCC tear. Both direct have it. It's what's retiring Dominic Thiem, retired Del Potro, Gustavo Carr. I mean, you could go to Leighton Hewitt. The list goes on and on. It's going to be tough, man. It's going to be tough. But what I would probably, if you're kind of fixed in this position, I'd really focus on how much you can drive the elbow up, right? It's going to be a little bit difficult to have the same control. So you're going to have to kind of pick what's working for you. Maybe a top spin serve or a slice serve, or just are working through flat. But yeah, man, I feel for you. The wrist is a tough one to work around.
Indeed.
I wish I had better news. I hate saying
I know. It's like, yes.
And without seeing it, yeah. I mean, without seeing it, it's really tough to say.
Guys, we have time for one more here. So I'm going to try and pick the best one. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not kidding. I'm going to try and pick the best ones. Give me a second.
No offense. Have you?
This just seems intelligent. I just saw a lot of intelligent words, so I don't like his last name.
Well, there you go, Jim.
All right, Jim,
Scott thinks you're smart.
Question about the backswing. My backswing falls straight back with the back of my hand toward the sky.
Back of my hand.
This is your back.
Hand.
Back of your hand towards the sky.
Okay.
All right. As my racket drops behind my back, as I begin to uncoil the kinetic chain up to the ball. That's exactly what we want. I learned to serve with a symmetric motion of the arms. That is not what we want. Power coming more from muscle extension and acceleration than muscle contraction. That wasn't even a question. He tricked me, Jim.
Yeah. That's a statement, Jim.
That
is
a
statement.
All right.
Not a wrong statement, though.
Yeah, that's exactly what we want. So good statement, correct statement.
Muscle extension, acceleration. He's talking about like a stretch short cycling. Like it's we won't bore you with it. But that's kind of the I don't know, the biomechanics, if you will, of what's happening on the serve.
All right, I'm going to give one more bonus ones because that was very clearly a statement. Maxine says, in the Curious video, his hand is up throwing the ball early in the process and yours is a bit later. What is the best order? I mean, the answer is it's personal preference, but can you tell them why?
Yeah. So in the Curious video, his hand is up throwing the ball early.
She's just saying his tossing arm gets moving before yours.
Oh,
does.
yeah. So we refer to this as lag, right? And so back in the day, what you would see is like the Pete Samprases of the world. I'm going to show you Pete Sampras because he's such a great player. Or maybe I'm not. I don't know. Reference material. I don't know where it is.
I was just thinking, man, I wish more technology could not work out today on day 2 here. There he is.
So Pete had like the most classic lag of anyone. All right. So you'll see that the racket is all the way down here. And he kind of held it for a minute as it worked through the back. And then the tossing arm went all the way up. And the racket is still down there. We don't see that anymore. This is kind of what Thomas Burditch had. And later in his career, he worked more abbreviated. And what we're seeing now is more like what we see with Sebastian Korda and some of the newer guys are on tour. And this is what I'm referencing here, is that the racket is on is lower, but it's really just moving up to this right to left. But the arm leading just creates a racket lag. Now, and what I'm demonstrating, I absolutely want your arm leading. This is critical. I want your arm leading. But when we're learning this, it's going to be important as the arm starts to move that you start getting this in conjunction, right? My personal serve, I lag much. I lag. I keep my racket pretty much from the dominant side of my body until I've released the toss, and then everything else is catching up. I feel like when you're learning that, though, it's really, really difficult to feel it all sink in. So it's much easier to toss and then let it all come together. So it's the tossing arm, and then the salute happens just a little bit lagged, all right? But we don't have to lag like the Semprases of the world or
no, they guys
like
got
that. Or Curious, yeah.
All right, guys, that is it for today. One last time, if you have not grabbed the workbook and the recordings, please go do this. It's less than the cost of a tennis lesson. We really do this intentionally because we want you to pick this up and be able to go back and look at these videos time and time again. You're going to want to print that workbook out, put it in your bag when you're in your matches. If things aren't going well, you can refer back to it as a tool. So go to this link right here. It's also in the comments section if you don't have time to screen grab this or type it out. But do go there. That really is like kind of the insurance that this works for you. And if you end up missing, a couple minutes here and there, you can dive in and watch it at your own leisure if you buy the recordings. Tomorrow, day 3 of our 5-day serve challenge. We will see you at noon Eastern time yet again.
Talking about rhythm. We're talking about putting it all together finally, right? So now you have the moving parts. How do we put it all together, make it sync, make it fluid, make it have some rhythm?
Indeed. And guys, thanks for sticking with us. We didn't really see attendance drop at all through all of our technical difficulties, which I really appreciate. So you must enjoy looking at Nate's face, or we're doing something right. So thank you guys for the loyalty and for sticking with us. We look forward to helping you again tomorrow at noon Eastern time in day 3. Talk to you guys soon.